All right, guys, today we're going to talk a bit about route planning, planning your trip. Now, a couple of different options you have. You could use a commercially available route, something like, let's take a look at this. This would be from Backcountry Discovery Routes. This is their Wyoming trip, and they also have Butler maps that you can get to accompany that as well. And we'll talk about some of the pros and cons of doing the commercial type route. And planning your own route, some things that you can expect based on those. There's lots of companies or people, organizations that put together what I'm going to call commercially available route. So there's people like the BDR that put together Colorado BDR, Utah, Wyoming, you name it, there's a ton of them. There's also some available GPS Kevin, there you'll find him on the web, and he puts together routes as well, and he also puts together trips, provides GPS routes for you as well, and they have good descriptions. So here's some of the positives, pros and cons of that type of route. One is that you're taking a well-traveled route that gives you then access to forums, people talking about those routes because they've done them before. It gives you some of those maps like this we'll take a look at in a minute. There's videos available online, so if you go to YouTube, you may see videos of that exact route that you want to take. It gives you a vague idea of the difficulty of that trail. Then we'll do some trail ratings, and one thing I want to mention is a lot of times people underestimate the difficulty of the route as they're planning it. Because of weather conditions, it can be way more tough, or even easier if they've done it in the winter and you're doing it in the summer. So you need to keep that in mind. And also, we tend to overestimate our abilities. So a route that somebody says is for an intermediate rider may be a little bit over our head, and we may consider ourselves an expert. Just keeping those things in mind. So the GPS routes that are available, downloadable. I'll show you some of those here in a minute. That's a real big advantage. The route is pretty much laid out for you. You have somewhat of a guarantee, in a sense, that especially with the ones like the BDR, they'll update those routes depending on road closures and things like that. So you're less likely to run into a dead-end road. Some of the negatives is that you may expect that the level of detail that they're giving you is very precise, and when you look at the maps that I'll show you here in a second, you'll see that the level of detail may not be what you need when you get to that location. So relying on the map that they give you on its entirety is probably not a great idea. However, planning your own route, there's some advantages and some disadvantages as well. One of those would be it's more adventurous because you're planning the entire thing. Chance of you running into a closed road is pretty high. It's hard to tell unless you call the forest agencies and check road conditions and things like that to see if those roads, one, still exist, two, are open and are still accessible. You can go through them. So there's always that. That adds a bit of excitement, if you will. You can plan every aspect of the route. That's can be a positive thing, but it's a lot of work, and we'll get into some of that here in a minute as well. Your trip may need to change along the way on one that you plan yourself because of road closures. The difficulty level may get too hard. You don't have any guarantee of how easy it might be. And you need to consider the riders that are going along. So we're going to get into some of this stuff in a bit more detail, as well as some others along this video, and so you can expect some of that. I'm going to go over some of the different maps that are available, GPSs, and tools that you can use on the web, and then kind of what you need to bring with you, as far as do you need the GPS? Do you need to bring maps? What detail of maps do you need? And we'll go from there. Enjoy. All right, first things first, you need to pick a location. So your destination will matter, and depending on the time of year. Let's go with a commercially available route. So we're going to use, because of the purposes of this trip, we're going to use the Wyoming BDR route as our guide. That's where we're going to start, so we know where we're going. You could pick some other sources. Let's go around here and check out. Let's move over to This is Google My Maps. I just have some things saved here, and here's an interesting one. This is from, let's see, this is GPS Kevin's route down the Baja Peninsula. So if you use his and you say you wanted to go to Baja, he's got a lot of detail in this GPS file. And you can see the routes in red that are difficult. The ones in blue are a main route. Easy sections are in green. And he even lays out all the gas stops, places you can stay. And so some of the detail is really great. So you pick a location like that and you pick somebody that you're going to use and you can download those details. Let's get into the Wyoming BDR and what they give you. All right, what I have in front of me right here is the Butler maps that's available from the BDR website. You can get to that by going to just typing in Wyoming BDR or just BDR. You can go to TourTech and they have a link there as well. They're affiliated with TourTech. Butler Maps is a completely separate organization and they've created maps for it. So let's take a look at this map. And I know the detail here is you're not really going to be able to pick up, but I just wanted to kind of give you some idea. This section right here in orange is what they call the Red Desert Loop. And then you look at this, and this is the start. It says start of the BDR, and it gives you this detail of the ride. Now that detail, which here, if you're looking at it, looks pretty well detailed. And you see there's a road going off there. Don't take that one, go to the right. Follow this along. Looks like they've got some camping areas planned out and all of that. So all on that route, that looks pretty detailed, but let's take a look at what that looks like on Google Maps or Google Earth. And in this case, I'm going to use a few different tools to my, I'm going to use this map that we have here that you just looked at. I'm going to look at Google Maps, and I'm also going to use Gaia GPS, which is a tool that I use as well, and that gives me some other detail. So let's take a look at that next. All right, we're taking a look at two things. We're going to look at the map that's from Butler Maps, and we're going to look at Gaia GPS. And we want to look at the level of detail. So when you get on site to this area, and let's take a look at the Red Desert, and that is this orange section that we pointed out just a few minutes ago. And the level of detail, you can see there's some other trails in here. Like there's one here, there might be one going up that way and one over here. So you'd think that's pretty easy to follow. And some of these look like they're easy to follow because there's only a few different turnoffs here and there. Okay, so that seems pretty easy. If I follow this along and I've got maybe my GPS or even this map, it looks like I can make out because there's only one, two, I kind of know where all those turnoffs are. But let's take a look at that same area looking at Gaia GPS. And Gaia has a few different things going on here. You see all the squares and everything. That's showing land ownership, so I know what if that's BLM land or if it's privately owned land, if it's a type of forest service, things like that. But we're looking at this trail here, so I've got an overlay of the GPS tracks. And if I just start moving in here, we can start seeing that there are lots, and hopefully you can see that on, here you go. Look at just how many turnoffs there are. There are literally hundreds of these turnoffs littered all over the place. And some of them go to the same location. So on your map there, they never saw it. There was this direction or that direction. And you get to sort of a trail junction here, and you're going to wonder, do I go right or left? Well, it doesn't really matter, but maybe they wanted you to see this, or maybe there was an obstacle there that you can't get by. Other places it can get more difficult because let's say you get to this section here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 different directions you could go. And if you're looking at that map, it's going to be difficult to know from this map. And that's that corner right there. We come into this corner and there's one turnoff that goes to the left, it looks like. So I know not to go that way. But if we look at this, there's actually, that's that turnoff here, which you're not going to follow, but there's 1, 2, 3, there's 4 different directions to go. So it would be very difficult to follow it on this map and actually take the right junction. Even if you have your GPS loaded, if you use a street turn-by-turn navigation GPS, it may tell you to go this way, because maybe that thinks it's shorter to go up and around that way versus following it around this direction. And so if you make a wrong turn, that part would disappear. I'm going to cover that a bit more later in the type of units you use when you get on the trail. But I just kind of wanted to show you the level of detail that is lacking on a map like this. So what could you do if you didn't have a GPS? You would need to get some more detailed maps. You could use Forest Service maps or hunting maps. This map gives you a fantastic general idea of where you're going. Another area we could look at is see how it shows a camp. There's a little teepee type thing right there. Sorry if you can't see that, but that designates sort of a camping area. And if we were to go to, and I could just pull up on, let's check out Google Maps here for a minute. Well, actually it says Battle Mountain Viewpoint, so I know it's probably in that area. But if I look on, let's turn that off so you can see this area. Oh, that's the, this shows you the elevations at least. If I go back to layers, we can go to, well, that's a pretty good layer, I think, for us. So we'd be following up Highway 70 here, and this is actually the turnoff. On this map, it's showing us just a little tiny, let's see if I can get that right there. It's just a little tiny turnoff. It looks like there would just be a campground right here just off the way, but actually it's about a mile down the road, and there's another turnoff that goes to Battle Creek, and the campground is actually located right here, and you can see it's Battle Creek Campground. So there's actually two turnoffs we need to take, not just one. And if I put that up on with a overlay of satellite view, then we can see there's this little creek that goes up here, and the road goes up a little ways, and there's some camping in here. So it's always good to take a look at that. It's not a really developed campground, yet you can camp there. So that kind of detail is sort of missing in the Butler maps, and you might want to take a look at each one of those locations. All right, let's get into more of this route planning and what tools we're using. All right, getting into these tools, first thing I was talking about, we did talk a little bit about maps, and what I choose to use depends on if I plan my own entire route. I'll bring a GPS. There's a couple different kinds of GPSs. There's one that follows a track only, and then there's the turn-by-turn navigation type GPSs that you find you're used to in like your car. They make them for motorcycles. Garmin makes a ton of them. It's the one that tells you there's a left turn coming in, 200 yards or something like that, or 2 miles to your next exit. The type that is follows a track or a route, which usually says following tracks. It doesn't give you any of that. It just shows a line on the map, similar to what we were seeing on, if I go to the topo maps here, it shows you a line just like this on the map, and you need to follow it. So let's say you're going up this road right here, and you miss your turn, the line would still be here, and it doesn't change, and you just notice that that line went away, and you'd have to go back and find it, and then you follow that. A turn-by-turn navigation type GPS, let's go back to that, and let's say I'm following this road up here, and I miss it. It can actually reroute me along that road right there and back over to here. So that's sort of the downside of the turn-by-turn navigation type GPS. That's like the Garmin units. I use a Trail Tech, and it does this exact thing. It just overlays this track on my map, and it never changes. So even if I miss the turn, I have to go back and I'll see that. And then we got the type of map. So I bring my GPS, I bring the Trail Tech, and that has my tracks located on the GPS. And then I'll bring, for a route that's already planned for me, I'll bring this like a Butler Maps, something like that. If I've planned my own route, then I will put the route on my GPS, same thing, the Trail Tech, but then I will bring either Forest Service maps or hunting maps. The hunting maps are massively detailed. They have land ownership and things like that on them. The Forest Service maps have some of that. They're a little less detailed, but you can get larger maps for a larger area, and they're more detailed than, say, a state map. So you could use a state map like a California map, something like that, but it's going to lack the detail of those trails and things like that for off-road use. Hunting maps have the most, but you probably have to bring a lot of them. And then the Butler maps, as you saw earlier, just lacks some of the detail, but gives you really great idea of things along the way. So they'll have put things on this map to help you out, like where gas stops are, where locations where you might find camping. So they've done a lot of work to find these types of things. There's groceries, there's hotels, and there's gas. And this is important information you don't just see on all maps. So that's a big plus for something like that. And then we get into some of the tools, and I covered the GPSs, turn-by-turn GPS, a track following GPS, and you could also use your phone. Your phone can probably do both. Now you have to download different types of software to do a track following GPS on your phone. The only downside on the phone is that you need to keep charging it. And that's a little bit smaller maybe than what you'd have. But you can set up good phone mounts and things like that on your motorcycle. You can set up a little charging system, and you can get away with a phone for a lot of what you need to do. You can get U.S. Forest Service maps. You can get the detailed hunting maps. You can get Gaia GPS. You can get Onyx Off-Road. There's all sorts of apps. Talking about apps, we get into some of the web tools that I use. And so I use Gaia. There's also Onyx Off-Road. Those are kind of the same. They're very similar. I will cover one. This one's from Garmin, and it's called Basecamp. And I always recommend against that. It's difficult to use. It's really, really ancient and old. And people get into wanting to use that because when they get their Garmin GPS, that's one way to load your maps in there. It's a lot easier to do it in other ways. We can show you, like Google My Maps will do it. Lots of other applications can do that. There's group software sites from some of the overland web channels and things like that. They've created their own software applications, and you could use those as well. So I mentioned Google My Maps. That's a really unknown. So every time I mention that, nobody knows what it is. They think it's Google Maps, and it's not. And so let me pull that up really quick, and I'm going to find Google My Maps is in here somewhere. Oh, we showed that just a few minutes ago when I was showing this one from GPS Kevin and that route there. And if I go back, it's going to show me a couple of others here. And so if I can load these maps, and it shows the maps that I've created. And you can create all these routes in here in this mapping application, and then you can put all your waypoints in here, places you want to go, places you want to stop, and then you can download it, and you can upload maps from this site, which you can't do on Google Maps. So this gives you the ability to download and upload and create multiple points, and then still have the detail that you want, say from Google Maps. It's all in here. So that's a really nice feature. Another one to look at would be to look at something like Google Earth. That's another thing sometimes I will use to reference. I usually have one or two up at a time when I'm doing planning. When you get to the site, the things that you're going to bring, I bring some sort of a paper map, and that's sometimes just a backup or a reference. I bring it for electronic. I do always have my phone with me, and I've got those apps loaded for the maps from the U.S. Forest Service. And then I also have Gaia GPS on that. And I have my route loaded just as a backup. And then I use the Trail Tech on the trail with me. As we move forward in planning, even though this route that we've got here, we've got the map, there's videos available, there's documented places they've stayed, it's really important to take a look at the areas of the map and how far you might think you're going to go in a day. They've got sections here, so there's section 1 through 8, sometimes 9 or 10 sections. Those aren't necessarily how far you'll go in a day. And so you want to look up places to stay, places to camp, and that's why we're taking a look at that one area where we're saying, okay, there's a campground. Let's take a look at another good example. And I know I need a place to stay here in section 1. Probably move into section 2 here, and I can see some camping areas here on the map, and they've designated a few areas. It's really hard to tell what that's going to look like until you get there. That's kind of why I use different applications, and we can take a look here. What does that look like on Gaia GPS? And here's that same area. Trail comes through here, And as we scan in, we see different areas that they marked on the map for different camping locations. And that is in their GPS file, which is super cool. And this looks like, because you can see this is a pretty steep incline here, because with the Gaia we've got the topo map loaded, and the closer those lines are together, the steeper the cliffs are, the farther out, the flatter the land is. And as we come in here, this area has got to be very beautiful, because it's got high, really high cliffs, 11,600 feet from down here at 10,000 feet. So these cliffs are over 1,000 feet tall, and within just a few, like a half a mile. So that's going to be pretty spectacular. So that area is going to look really neat. Let's take a look at Google Maps in that same area. This should be the same area here. Let's go in here. There it is, Lewis Lake. It's this one right here. I still don't know what this area looks like exactly, but what I can do, I'm going to come down to this little button here, which is Street View. And if I click on that, it pops up all these little bubbles, and people have taken pictures. So I want to see what that looks like from this area, and I should get a good indication. That's what this area looks like. So that looks pretty awesome to me. And yeah, so let's take a look at another one of those really quick, so we can pick another picture down here. Let's take that one and see what that looks like. So people have taken pictures, and we get a better idea. See, that's what that mountain range looks like right there. So I know that's going to be a pretty location, and I think I want to camp there. You can also find, pictures of the campground and all of that by doing a little bit of research, and that's a heck of a lot more impressive than looking at this map, or even when I was looking at the topo map here, which gave me some idea. So we're going to try and camp at one of these areas in here right after section 1. And that's the kind of thing you can do. You can also take a look at some of these difficult sections like right here, and see what they look like. And I look at that deep water crossing, expert only. And when I went to take a look at that area, I saw that there was many ways to get around that deep water crossing. That's good information to know. What I'll end up doing is making a list, and let me just show you my list here really quick. This is my list of the different days that we start the trip, where I'm headed, and what campgrounds or what camping areas I want to stay in, and about how far they are from different things so people can look them up. And then what I do is I send those to everybody that's going on the trip. They can take a look at that, and then we have a meeting to discuss them, and if people like or don't like those areas, we can change those before we go. That way we have at least a good idea where we're going to go, and we can always change it along the way, but people have a better indication of what we're going to see and do on the trip. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. There's a lot more to come. Next thing we're going to talk about is the gear we bring, and a good packing list, what to bring with you, and the type of list you should put together. One of the things I want to express, just from doing all this planning, you really want to take into consideration the riders that are going with you and what their expectations are. How far do these riders want to ride every day? What is their technical expertise, in a sense, on the bike? Are they advanced riders? Or do they do a lot of off-road? Do they do a lot of street riding? And then kind of get a comfort level for each. How often are they going to need to stop? Are they going to be comfortable with the terrain that you're going over? And what kind of pace that your riders want to ride. If you've got enough people, you can create riding groups. Things like that. Good things to keep in mind with your groups and your riding. Anyways, we will see you next time with our gear and an amazing packing list for you guys to go by. See you soon.